Okay, here's my last pitch for Romeo and Juliet. If you go anywhere on any continent, basically any country in the world, and you say Romeo and Juliet, folks will know what you're talking about. Now, all my students get up in arms because we're reading Shakespeare, and it's hard, and the language is tough, but the reality is it's also the standard is think about the plays, Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, Hamlet. I know you're not supposed to say the name, but I don't subscribe to that. Othello, The Taming of the Shrew, Twelfth Night. These are major plays that, despite the language problem, Midsummer Night's Dream, despite the language problem, are still presented today. Why is that? I think that it's because whoever William Shakespeare was, and I'll talk about that a little bit more about that on Thursday's video. Whoever he was, he had the ability to put characters, whether he came up with them or not, into situations that were called for strong choices. Romeo and Juliet is no other. Juliet had no choices involved, and yet she acted as if she had choices involved. Now, where'd she get that idea? Where'd that come from? In an era when women were treated like possessions, like chattel, they were bought and sold. Where did she think she ought to be able to marry this guy, and the wrong guy at that, from the wrong family, and get away with it? Others didn't think that. Why did she? We begin to discuss in depth in this class the concept of choices. Now, I think if you listen to playwrights, they will tell you, well, I didn't really have a choice about that. That's just what came to me, as if the novel or the play or the whatever you're writing sort of writes itself through you. And yet there is this situation where the playwright is indeed putting these characters in situations to play out this story in front of us and inviting us to join he or she in this process. That is what theater does. And as such, we can sometimes deal with more difficult material on the stage than you can in real life because we're watching a story unfold before us. And there's power in that. In a few weeks, I'm going to ask you to write a paper on the role of choice. One aspect will be how you go about making decisions. Many of you are young people beginning your adult life, and maybe this process is not cemented for you, and I want you to think through that. Some of you are non-traditional students who, like me, are a little older, and we have more of a body of work to look back on and see the good choices we made versus the not so good. And sometimes that line is very indistinct between good and bad. We're doing the best we can in the situation. We make the choice we do. And so this paper, one page will be on how you go about making choices. And then second page will be to compare and contrast that with how the playwright makes choices. Now, here's a guaranteed F. Well, the choices I'm making are in real life and the choices in a play aren't. Don't send that to me. Not what I'm asking for. You realize that when a dictator comes to power, ordinarily, the first two groups of people that he or she gets rid of are the poets and the playwrights, because there's power in those mediums. And so you need to think about why a playwright might do this or that with this or that character. We're going to deal with A Doll's House a little bit later on by Henrik Ibsen when this paper is actually due, in which the main character makes a really out there decision, the one that in this case, again, a woman simply would not have really had the opportunity to make, and yet she makes it. Why does the playwright do that? You got to dig in. Some of you are trying to skim by in this class, I know the difference between an answer you thought through and an answer you didn't. And this is an opportunity to dig deep, to dive deep, and to think about the choices that you have made, are making, and will make. It's kind of an important paper. And really, this discussion begins and is fueled by Romeo and Juliet, the play that nobody wants to read. It's usually taught in the U.S. to students around 14, which I guess I get that theoretically Juliet's about that age. But if you haven't lived some life, then you can't get Romeo and Juliet. You can't get it. And so I'm going to ask you to watch a full movie production of Romeo and Juliet, and then tell me, what are the good choices, what are the bad choices, and what's it all about? Okay? That's assignment number 1 this week.